Hey there, welcome back to my tutorial series on the Cirklon Aux Events. We're just continuing where we left off in the previous one, where we looked at the knob, grab, and mask events. We were actually using the aux event that we'll be discussing in this one for that one, which was clearly pretty self-explanatory since we were able to dive into it without looking at the manual, but it's a step value event. Cool, jumping into it. Last video was a little unwieldy, so we're going to try to keep this slightly more concise. The set value event group mainly has events to set a pattern value on the step to a new value. So the concept being, we've got note values, we have velocity, we have length values. We can use an aux event to just change that to a different value than what we have. So speaking of the note value, we have D on the third step. We can use an aux event to set that to an A or an E or whatever. Why does this make sense? We kind of stumbled upon the reason for it in the last video. You can use things like mask events to sort of like use probability to switch between the value. We'll just start with that. But yeah, reading through this, you might want to use it to randomly switch a step, or by using the aux-D accumulator and a mask event, you can perform pattern morphs where the notes of the pattern gradually switch from the normal note values to those set in a set note aux. Sounds very cool. Don't know how to do that because we haven't explored the accumulator events yet, but I'm assuming you have aux-D accumulate, like iterate on the value over each pattern, and that way it can slowly morph into this other pattern. I like it conceptually. We'll try to come back to that when we explore the accumulator values. And then to finish out this section, before we start exploring things, there you can see that it has the main values that we discussed, note, velocity, length, and then delay as well. Transpose by n adds a set value to the note value. That's actually interesting. I feel like I would be more interested in doing that to set like relative values than set note. So we'll explore that as the first example. And then, yeah, set a value to aux-C and aux-D. And then you can also set a MIDI channel. That's pretty cool. We can test that with the Digitone since it's a 16-channel multi-timbral synth. Let's jump into it. You can see that from the previous video, which was filmed immediately before this, I got cold, so I put on a cardigan. We already have a couple of set note aux events set up in here, so now we have 3 currently. Let's just use the 4th one. However, I'm going to change this to a transpose event. Yeah, how I thought it would work, how we thought it would work. Change the value to 2 and it just shoots everything up 2. And we're using force to scale. It doesn't look like we have the option of with or without force to scale. But because we're using a scale, I think we're just using C major. It's playing nicely, so it's actually pretty cool. But what I'd like to do, so we're just going to bump it all up an octave. And then we're going to use a randomized aux event. Oh, we're actually randomizing the value of oxt. Essentially just randomizing the node at that point. What I want to do is mask oxt. So I believe what's happening, if this is working as I'm intending it to, we are giving a 50% probability of whether it shoots up an octave or not. Now we have it an octave below. So you can see that, yeah, it works really well with the transpose by event. With some other sequencers, I would do this with like sort of the MIDI effect mentality. I did that a lot when I had a Hapax prior to my time in the Cirklon line coming to fruition. So a little bit more programmy, but a lot more flexible, as we discover is often the case with the Cirklon. Okay, I'm now switching it to set the velocity, which I'm setting the velocity to 0, essentially just muting the gate. But we can do like 80 just to make randomly half of the notes quieter. Or each step has a 50% chance of being 127 velocity or 80-ish. This could probably be really cool with like hi-hat programming. And then delay's actually pretty cool. More so than I thought, but since we're still using this 50% random value on whether oxt is taking place, it's just kind of giving like half-ish of the notes kind of a wonky offset. And then we can use like a span of ranges for the delay, so you can get really wild with it with just 2 aux events, which is cool. If you want to be more explicit, if you want to do this pattern morphing that we'll get into later, you could just like literally override the step values of each note and just have 2 separate sequences. If we want to do that here, I don't really want to set it up, then we could use that 50% probability to turn, like, will it be this other sequence or sequence A or sequence B? Cool conceptually. But before we go, let's just check the set MIDI channel. I don't understand why the value... Oh, I see. In this view, you get this numerical value, but it actually is, it correlates with one of the options here. I'm assuming the first value here is the port. Okay, we're turning off the 50% probability. I'm not sure why this... Okay. I think what happened is we changed the channel with an aux event, and then it just maintained that even though we turned it off. Okay, but looking back at this, we have 2:5. I'm assuming that means MIDI port 2 and then the channel, which is actually perfect for what we want. Yeah, so it seems like once you change the channel, it maintains that. So on the first note, I'm changing it to MIDI channel 5, which corresponds with the 5th track on the Digitone, and then on the third step, I'm switching it back to the first channel. They're both just sine waves, so you can't really tell the difference. One is going through delay, one's not. Let's just modify B to be, or the fifth MIDI channel, fifth track on the Digitone to be like a saw wave or something. So basically we have 4 notes in the sequence. Half of them are on... We're like switching MIDI channels on half of the notes, which honestly is pretty wild. And now we have a 50% probability on whether that event fires, so the actual MIDI channel is, in a sense, not randomized, obviously very controlled randomization, but there is some unpredictability about what's going to happen, which I did not realize that was possible. That's a lot more interesting than I anticipated from these specific events. Great, let's keep this one short. These are set step value events, and thanks for joining for this one. We'll catch you in the next one, which I'm going to film right now instead of waiting 3 months from now.